Welcome to Vanguard, where humans aren't the underdogs. We're the endgame. Enjoy the journey. The message arrived on an otherwise unremarkable Tuesday morning, which later made the entire disaster almost comically absurd. Commander Sarah Mitchell was halfway through her third cup of coffee, strong, bitter, the only thing keeping her conscious after a 16-hour shift, when the communications array at Kepler 442 Research Outpost lit up so violently it looked as if someone had detonated a flare directly inside the console. The screens blazed red in cascading sequences. Every alert siren in the control room erupted at once, a chaotic, metallic orchestra that shook dust from the ceiling tiles. Sarah nearly dropped her mug. Coffee splashed across the floor as she lunged toward the main console. "What the hell is happening?" she shouted over the shrieking alarms. Lieutenant Park was already at his station, fingers a blur on the holographic interface, the blue light dancing across his pale, shocked face. "Ma'am," he swallowed, "we're receiving a transmission on every frequency, all of them, simultaneously." "That shouldn't even be technically possible," Sarah muttered, pushing closer. "Who has that kind of broadcasting power?" Park looked up at her with a gravity she rarely saw, even during drills, even during the tense standoffs with neighboring colonies. "Origin trace complete. The signal comes from the Valdrath Imperium." The room fell into the kind of silence that only true fear could create. The Valdrath Imperium. Not a nation, not a regional power, an ancient, sprawling, monolithic empire at least 10 millennia old. Their banners hung over nearly 1,000 star systems. They had crushed 23 species so thoroughly that no surviving biological traces existed. Their military doctrine was legendary, their brutality mythic, their arrogance cosmic. Even speaking their name out loud carried a weight that made the air feel thicker. "Put it on screen," Sarah ordered. The main display flickered once, twice, then stabilized. A towering figure appeared, something between a panther and a monitor lizard, standing nearly 8 feet tall. Midnight blue scales glistened like oiled metal, absorbing ambient light instead of reflecting it. Golden eyes burned with an intensity Sarah instinctively leaned away from. The creature's armor was ornate the way ancient ceremonial blades were ornate, covered not in functional plating, but in symbols carved across the centuries, perhaps millennia, of uninterrupted military tradition. "I am High Strategist Krelnath," the creature declared, voice deep, resonant, and carried through universal translator protocols with chilling clarity. "Supreme War Coordinator of the Valdrath Imperium." Its tone dripped with the casual superiority of someone who had never been challenged and genuinely could not imagine what that felt like. "This message is directed to the primitive species calling itself humanity." The word primitive scraped across every person in the room. "You have expanded into territories that fall within the sacred buffer zones of the Imperium," Krelnath continued. "This is unacceptable. You have violated ancient boundaries that have stood longer than your species has walked upright. Your ignorance is not a shield." The screen shifted. A montage of the Valdrath military filled the display. Armadas of titanic warships, tens of thousands of them drifting in disciplined formations. Planets turned to glass, civilizations reduced to ash. Archival recordings of conquests so old their original suns had already begun to fade. The Valdrath Imperium has maintained galactic order for 10,000 years. We have brought stability to 847 systems. 23 species have challenged our dominion. 23 species no longer exist. Someone behind Sarah whispered a curse. The display changed again. A holographic map of human space appeared, 12 systems highlighted in ominous red. "You will withdraw from these systems within 72 hours. You will submit to Imperium oversight and governance. You will provide reparations equal to your species' total economic output for the next 50 years. 50 years? Someone muttered. "They're insane." "If you refuse," Krelnath said, leaning forward until his golden eyes filled the screen, We will eliminate your species entirely. We have done this before. We will do it again. Your primitive weapons cannot harm us. This is not a negotiation. The transmission ended. No one moved. No one breathed. Kepler 442 was suddenly too small, too fragile, too real. Then Lieutenant Park exhaled shakily. "Ma'am, should I forward this to Terran Command?" "Already done," Sarah replied, fingers racing across her console. "It went out on every channel. Earth, Luna, outer colonies, military nodes. Everyone is seeing this." Her terminal pinged. "And Command is already preparing a response." The reply arrived less than an hour later. Admiral Rebecca Zhao aboard the TSF Indomitable. The bridge crew gathered around the main display. Zhao's image stabilized, mid-50s, short gray hair, a face carved by wars that would have broken lesser officers. She wore a simple uniform devoid of ceremonial flair. She looked directly into the camera and said only, "Message received and acknowledged. We'll see you in 72 hours. No bravado, no counter-threat, no emotional display, just pure, distilled human confidence." Sarah felt her lips curve into a smile despite the existential danger. "That," she murmured, "is so perfectly us." And then things became bizarre. Within minutes, the networks exploded with memes. Someone turned Krelnath's face into a hissing space cat. Another showed the Valdrath fleet with the caption, "Mom said it's my turn with the galaxy." Talk shows laughed openly at the ultimatum. News anchors tried to stay serious and failed spectacularly. But the analysts? The analysts dismantled the Valdrath threat with cold precision. They think we're primitives. They haven't fought a species with gravitational manipulation. They've spent 3,000 years beating Stone Age cultures. They don't understand human warfare. A retired general put it bluntly, "We spent 2 centuries perfecting ways to annihilate ourselves. These lizards have no idea what's coming." Meanwhile, Valdrath High Command watched human broadcasts with growing confusion. To them, the laughter looked like fear masking hysteria. The memes looked like disorganized panic. The calmness of human fleets looked like paralysis. They had no idea that this was simply how humanity handled stress, with humor, defiance, and unshakable confidence. 72 hours suddenly felt like the countdown to a cosmic inevitability, one neither side fully understood yet, though humans certainly acted like they did. And far across the stars, in a throne room older than human civilization itself, the Valdrath Imperium believed it had just delivered the final ultimatum humanity would ever receive. They did not yet know that, from the moment they sent that message, their empire had already begun to die. The ultimatum spread across human space faster than any official announcement in Federation history. From Earth's sprawling megacities to the dusty homesteads on the rim, every civilian, soldier, scientist, and student saw the same towering reptilian warlord telling humanity to kneel or vanish. You would expect panic. You would expect riots. You would expect terrified leaders desperately trying to negotiate. Instead, humanity reacted the way humanity always had when confronted with the absurd. They laughed. At first, it trickled across the local nets like a slow leak of irreverent sarcasm. A few comments, a few edits, the kind of gallows humor humans instinctively used when the universe tried to frighten them. But then it detonated into a cultural supernova. Memes proliferated like a hyper-optimized virus. Krelnath's perfectly polished ceremonial armor was photoshopped into a sparkly prom dress. Someone turned his golden eyes into googly orbs, shaking in random directions. The footage of Valdrath's ships forming ancient battle formations gained a voiceover reading, "When Grandma brings out her special plates for guests." Many species would have cowered. The humans weaponized comedy. The more the Valdrath threatened, the funnier humans found it. But beneath the jokes was something deeper, an electric undercurrent of confidence. Not bravado, not arrogance, something colder, something earned. As the memes exploded, the talk shows and analysts kicked in. On a popular Terran current affairs broadcast, A host tried and failed to maintain composure as she replayed Krelnath's boast of 10,000 years of military dominance. A military historian smirked. 10,000 years of beating up pre-industrial species, he corrected. Let's not exaggerate. Another analyst leaned forward. They haven't fought a pure civilization in millennia. In fact, the last species they conquered that had anything close to organized resistance still used chemical rockets. The audience, watching live across the system, gasped, but not in fear, in disbelief. This was the so-called unstoppable empire, a retired general, scarred, calm, the kind of person who spoke with the authority of someone who had personally survived every type of battlefield hell, put it even more plainly. We perfected warfare on each other for 2 centuries, he said. These lizards don't understand how dangerous we are because they've never fought anyone remotely like us. They've been sparring with children while we were engaged in self-inflicted, extinction-level events. The phrase hung in the air like a guillotine. Self-inflicted, extinction-level events. The Valdrath had conquered civilizations unable to even conceptualize a threat beyond their home star. Humans had nearly blown themselves off the map multiple times because their political differences escalated into planet-scorching conflict. And the thing about a species that had once stood on the brink of annihilation, it learned. The Proxima Wars became a frequent topic of discussion across the nets. Younger civilians who had only heard the name in history lessons now dove into old documentary archives. They discovered a period of human history filled with unimaginable brutality, orbital bombardments, autonomous drone swarms, tactical nanobot plagues, atmospheric scorchers, and kinetic rods dropped onto cities at hypersonic velocities. For 2 centuries, humanity had walked willingly into the fire of its own making and somehow crawled back out again. Footage resurfaced. A swarm of AI-guided micro-missiles darkening the sky. A stealth frigate appearing from nowhere to eliminate an entire fleet. A city dome collapsing under the force of a single railgun strike. Soldiers fighting while the horizon glowed with the light of superheated soil. Humanity had survived these things. Humanity had built these things. Humanity had improved these things. Suddenly, Krelnath's 5,000 ships didn't look so terrifying. Meanwhile, far from the chaotic humor of human cyberspace, deep within the marble and sapphire halls of the Valdrath Imperium's capital, confusion began creeping into their intelligence reports. Reports of unusual civilian responses. Reports of widespread mockery. Reports of apparent psychological instability. Reports of non-hostile laughter directed at Imperium threats. The Valdrath could not interpret it. This level of emotional dissociation is typical of prey species under extreme duress, an analyst suggested. They are buckling under fear. They appear to be in denial, another agreed. A familiar collapse mechanism. Krelnath accepted these explanations because they made sense to him. In his empire, psychological resilience was tied to strict hierarchy, ritual, dominance. The idea that laughter could signal confidence, or worse, contempt, never crossed his mind. But back in human space, the mood sharpened. The memes continued, but alongside them, strategic mobilization advanced with elegant precision. Civilian transports began shifting routes. Military supply lines subtly increased throughput. Orbital factories quietly retooled their production lines. Elite combat AI began booting from deep storage hibernation. Defense grids across frontier systems calibrated for long-range kinetic engagements. All of it done without panic, without chaos, without any public announcement. To the untrained eye, it looked like normal logistical shuffling. To those who understood human military doctrine, it was unmistakable. Humanity was preparing for war. Yet there was still no mass mobilization. No fleets rushing to front lines, no frantic scrambling. And this, more than anything, confused Valdrath surveillance. One intelligence officer reported, human fleet movement remains statistically identical to pre-ultimatum baselines. Another, they have not altered patrol routes. Their defensive formations remained static. A strategist offered a triumphant hiss. Then they fear us, they freeze. But Thexel, the older advisor who had fought in conquest centuries earlier, frowned. Fear does not look like that, he muttered, observing footage of humans drinking coffee, laughing, training, continuing their lives. Fear is predictable. This is not. Yet his concerns were dismissed. Meanwhile, the Terran Third Fleet, under Admiral Zhao, remained the center of attention. Civilians posted clips of her famous stare-downs during the Proxima conflicts. Fans created compilations titled, "The Woman Who Looks at Genocidal Empires Like They're Mild Inconveniences." Her three-word reply, "We'll see you in 72 hours, became an overnight anthem. People printed it on shirts, ships painted it on their hulls, students engraved it onto their datapads. A musical remix went viral in under 6 hours, blending her voice with a pounding orbital beat track that topped the civilian charts. Humans weren't scared. They were annoyed, amused, energized. Every empire before Baldrath had mistaken this reaction for weakness. Every empire had discovered its mistake too late. For humanity, conflict wasn't an exception in their history. It was the crucible that forged their identity. And as the final hours of the ultimatum ticked away, one truth became increasingly clear. The Valdrath Imperium believed it had issued a warning. But humanity? Humanity saw it as a challenge, the kind they fully intended to answer. 70 hours after the ultimatum, the Valdrath Imperium completed what was, by their standards, a respectable demonstration of power. 5,000 warships, more than most conquered civilizations had ever seen collectively, assembled in flawless formation. Each vessel gleamed with the cold, ceremonial menace of a culture that believed its military tradition was synonymous with cosmic law. They formed the Phalanx, an overlapping shield lattice that had broken fleets for 7,000 uninterrupted years. It was the pride of Valdrath's strategy, the symbol of their inevitable victory. High Strategos Krelnath stood on the command deck of the Eternal Dominion, his scales shimmering with ritual oils, eyes bright with anticipation. The holographic display showed human space as a small cluster of insignificant stars. "Let this be a message to the galaxy," he proclaimed to his bridge crew. "The Imperium does not tolerate trespass." Meanwhile, 500,000 kilometers away, the Terran Third Fleet, 89 ships, remained exactly where they had been since the ultimatum began, floating in calm patrol patterns as though nothing of consequence approached. Their formation did not shift, their weapons did not prime, their engines did not flare. It was as if they awaited a taxi, not a genocidal armada. Inside the Indomitable's tactical conference room, Admiral Rebecca Jiao stood before a projection table surrounded by holographic faces. 89 ship captains, each appearing with varying degrees of alertness. Captain Chen of the TSF Persistence was still chewing the last bite of a sandwich. Commander Jackson of the cruiser Defiant was drinking from a mug that read, "I'm not arguing, I'm explaining why I'm right." Several officers multitasked with data windows floating beside them. The atmosphere felt like a university study group preparing for a midterm, not a meeting to discuss a galactic empire's war declaration. "All right, people," Zhao began. "Let's go over the final brief." She tapped a control. A tactical overlay appeared. Valdrath ship signatures, historical data, predictive models. "Our friends have assembled 5,000 ships. Numerical advantage, approximately 56-1. Someone muttered, "Sounds fair." A few captains snickered. Zhao allowed a thin smile. "Terran intelligence cracked their shield frequencies last night. Their defensive systems are optimized for energy weapon engagements. Plasma, particle beams, harmonic radiation. They've fought nobody using kinetic weapons for several millennia." Captain Chen raised an eyebrow. "So they have no countermeasures for relativistic slugs." "Worse," Zhao said. "They don't understand them. Their sensor arrays aren't calibrated to detect mass-based threats moving at fractional C velocities. They're also blind to the quantum targeting signatures our AI uses. Commander Torres of the battleship Valiant leaned forward. Any chance they adapt mid-fight? No, Zhao replied simply. Their entire doctrine is built around ancient ritual formations and slow tactical rigidity. They will advance in the phalanx. They will fire plasma lances. When these fail, they will continue advancing. A pause. And then we will kill them. No one in the room looked excited. No one swaggered. Their expressions were professional, almost bored. The Third Fleet was composed of veterans who had fought other humans, not ceremonial conquerors who expected their enemies to break at the sight of them. What about ammunition supply? Another captain asked. Zhao brought up firing simulations. Our primary rail batteries achieve kill certainty at 500,000 kilometers. We will not close distance. We will not maneuver unless necessary. We fire until they break. Then we cease fire. Do we pursue? Chen asked. No, Zhao said. If they flee, we let them. The strategic message is more important than a complete tactical kill. The captains shared glances of dry amusement. Commander Jackson raised his mug. To the Valdrath Imperium, may they learn something today. Laughter rippled across the conference. And then, just as casually, they returned to preparing their vessels for what would soon become a historical massacre. The Valdrath fleet arrived in system with dramatic fanfare, warp signatures blooming like supernova petals across the starfield. The phalanx formation unfurled with religious precision, thousands of shields linking into a shining wall of energy that glowed like a rising aurora. Every Valdrath warrior stood at attention, believing they were witnessing the beginning of humanity's extinction. Krelnath felt the swelling pride of a commander standing at the precipice of another triumphant conquest. Scan for human forces. Strategos, the sensor officer said, confused. I detect 89 vessels. They remain at previous coordinates. They have not moved. Krelnath frowned. They remain in formation? Yes, Strategos. They appear to be waiting, a junior officer hissed triumphantly. They have surrendered. They are frozen in fear. But Thexel, the old advisor, narrowed his eyes at the readings. Their power signatures are unusual. Their shields, I cannot classify them. Open a channel, Krelnath ordered. The human admiral appeared instantly. No ceremony, no guards, no towering throne, just a plain, functional bridge. Admiral Jiao sat in a simple chair, posture relaxed, expression unreadable. This is your final opportunity to surrender, Krelnath announced, voice booming. You face 5,000 warships. Withdraw and submit to our rule, or we will erase your species. Jiao blinked once. Negative. Come and take it. The channel closed before Krelnath could respond. Rage boiled in his veins. Advance! All ships, destroy them! The phalanx moved forward, shields glowing. At 800,000 kilometers, Krelnath gave the command, fire plasma lances. Thousands of brilliant beams erupted from the Valdrath formation, each capable of melting kilometers of hardened alloy. The lances raced across space and vanished. The energy scattered, deflected by invisible distortions in the vacuum. What happened? Krelnath roared. Strategos, the sensor officer stammered. Their field, it's disrupting our plasma. Gravitational shear? That is impossible, Thexel whispered. His scales paled. No species has mastered that technology at scale. The Valdrath fleet advanced anyway. At 500,000 kilometers, the humans fired. There was no flash, no sound, no bright arc of energy. One moment, the lead Valdrath dreadnought existed. The next, it simply came apart, shredded into vaporized metal in expanding atmosphere. Then another ship, then a third, then entire rows. What are they hitting us with? Krelnath demanded. Kinetic projectiles, the sensor officer choked. 0.4 light speed. Our shields cannot compensate. Impact energy equivalent to nuclear-level detonation. More icons vanished from the tactical map. Hundreds. Then hundreds more. Return fire, Krelnath shouted. Scatter formation. But scattering only made the slaughter faster. The human targeting algorithms isolated each vessel, predicting evasion patterns, adjusting trajectories in microseconds. The Valdrath energy weapons, designed for slow-moving targets, passed harmlessly through empty space. And then came the missiles. They moved like living things, accelerating at impossible rates, weaving through point defense fire with prescient accuracy. AI-guided, Thexel whispered hollowly. They know where we aim before we aim. Fusion detonations blossomed across the phalanx, tearing apart centuries-old battleships like drifting paper. Inside the Indomitable, the tactical officer announced updates in an even, almost bored tone. Target Alpha 3 destroyed. Alpha 4 destroyed. Magazine at 87%. Maintain firing pattern, Zhao said. Prioritize command vessels. Captain Chen's voice crackled over the comms. Persistence reporting 300 confirmed kills. Their formation is collapsing. Zhao glanced at the chronometer. 14 minutes since the Valdrath fleet opened fire. 14 minutes. 3,000 ships destroyed. 0 human casualties. The remaining Valdrath vessels broke formation entirely, fleeing at maximum thrust, initiating panic FTL jumps as soon as their drives charged. Cease fire, Zhao ordered. Do not pursue. On the Eternal Dominion, Krelnath stared at the battlefield, now a graveyard of molten debris. His mighty armada lay in ruin. The humans had not even deigned to chase him. Retreat, he whispered. All ships, retreat. As the few surviving Valdrath vessels jumped out of system, Krelnath's scales dimmed with shame. Humanity had not merely defeated the Imperium, they had humiliated them. And every sentient civilization with a telescope would soon witness it. The galaxy had just discovered a horrifying truth. Humanity was not the primitive species the Valdrath believed. Humanity was something far more dangerous. Humanity was prepared. The return of High Strategos Krelnath to the Valdrath capital was not the triumphant march the Imperium had expected. The Eternal Dominion limped into orbit with hull fractures, missing decks, and scorch marks from micro-debris impacts created during the massacre. The surviving ships, barely a quarter of the original 5,000, arrived in scattered, shameful clusters over the next 2 days. Some appeared with engines flickering erratically. Others arrived silent, their crews still in shock. One frigate emerged from FTL with half its stern missing. Another drifted dead, life support offline, crew suffocated long before the ship reached home. For a species that had not tasted defeat in 4,000 years, the psychological shock was seismic. The Valdrath Imperium prided itself on invincibility, on the mathematical certainty of its conquests. But now the citizens lining the orbital concourses witnessed their mighty warships returning not as symbols of dominance, but ruins trembling against the void. The emergency session of the Imperial Council convened within hours. The Grand Chamber of Thesseron Prime, usually a monument to overwhelming majesty, felt suddenly oppressive. Its towering marble columns, the holographic star map displaying 847 Valdrath-controlled systems, the glimmering banners of countless victorious crusades, all now seemed to mock the Empire rather than glorify it. Emperor Thracial sat atop his obsidian throne, armored in ancient ceremonial plate that had been worn by every ruler for 60 generations. His golden eyes burned with barely contained fury. Across from him, Krelnath stood, scales dulled and posture rigid with humiliation. Around them, council members hissed accusations, their voices echoing across the cavernous chamber. We lost 3,000 ships. An impossibility. A fabrication. How did this happen? Explain, Strategos. Krelnath activated the battlefield recording. The chamber fell silent as they watched the footage. Valdrath plasma lances firing, scattering harmlessly. Human vessels returning no visible fire. Valdrath dreadnoughts bursting apart into incandescent debris. The replayed destruction felt unreal, impossible, wrong. Kesserin, the Empire's senior science advisor, stepped forward, thin, pale, eyes wide in something dangerously close to awe. These weapons, his voice cracked, they fire solid metal at relativistic velocities. Our shields, optimized exclusively for energy dispersion, cannot stop them. We have no defense against mass-based projectiles traveling at 40% of light speed. The physics simply do not allow it. Then develop new shields, one counselor snapped. Kesserin shook his head slowly, each movement infused with dread. We would need to redesign our entire technological framework, centuries of work, maybe millennia. And even then, he swallowed, nothing guarantees success. Another council member demanded, why have we never encountered such weapons before? How can a primitive species possess technology we cannot even model? Kesserin pulled up historical records, highlighting every major Valdrath conquest. For 3,000 years, the most advanced species we fought had only early fusion drives. They lacked predictive AI, gravitational manipulation, and high-energy mass accelerators. They never developed kinetic warfare at these scales because they never reached the internal conflicts humans endured. The council chamber erupted in unease. Thexel, older than most present and one of the few survivors who had witnessed the human fleet firsthand, stepped forward. There was something else, he said quietly. The way they fought. No ritual, no honor, no emotion. It was not battle. It was execution. They killed us as if we were problems in an equation. A long silence followed. Finally, the Emperor spoke. We have grown complacent, he said, voice low. The admission alone made the temperature in the chamber drop. We have conquered weak species for so long that we forgot the existence of true adversaries. He rose to his full, towering height. Therefore, we must act. Assemble the Grand Armada. A ripple of gasps shot through the chamber. The Grand Armada? A counselor echoed. Your Majesty, 300,000 ships? That is 1/3 of our entire military. To mobilize such a force will leave entire sectors defenseless. It will take months to assemble, another protested. The Empire's infrastructure is already strained, a minister cried. But the Emperor's tone brooked no dissent. If humanity can destroy thousands of ships in minutes, then we will answer with overwhelming force. We will drown them in numbers. The Imperium will not fall. Mobilize the Armada immediately. Krelnath bowed deeply, though doubt simmered beneath his posture. It will be done, Majesty. Across the stars, the mood on Luna, the capital of the Terran Federation, was dramatically different. The Federation Council chamber lacked the grandeur of Thesseron Prime. No ornamental banners, no towering pillars, no unnecessary symbolism. It was a circular room, clean, functional, transparent walls offering a view of the Earth rising beyond the horizon. Secretary General Okafor stood at the center, reviewing incoming intelligence from the Valdrath core systems. The Imperium is assembling a massive fleet, he announced. Current estimates, 300,000 vessels. Their largest mobilization in recorded history. There were murmurs, but not of fear. Concern, yes, but controlled, measured. Admiral Zhao appeared via holographic projection from the Indomitable's bridge. Her image flickered slightly as the long-range connection stabilized. That is a significant force, Zhao said. Even with our technological advantage, a direct engagement would result in heavy casualties. We cannot allow them to dictate the battlefield. A council member asked, should we negotiate, demonstrate our willingness to avoid further bloodshed? We have already proven our strength. No, Okafor said firmly, cutting through the noise. If we negotiate now, every species in the galaxy will view us as vulnerable to pressure. We must establish that humanity is not to be challenged, not by threats, not by numbers. Then what is our move? Another asked. Zhao's eyes glinted. Phase 2 operations. The room quieted. We will not fight their armada, she continued. We will dismantle their empire. She expanded the holographic map. Red markers blinked across the Valdrath territory. Shipyards, fuel depots, communication relays, logistics hubs. They are pulling ships from across their empire. That means their infrastructure is critically exposed. The council leaned in. Our stealth ships will infiltrate their borders, Zhao said. Strike groups of 10 to 15 vessels, each highly mobile, each capable of independent operations. They will target infrastructure, supply lines, manufacturing facilities. They will destroy and vanish before counterforces arrive. A counselor frowned. Isn't that ruthless? Zhao nodded. It is, but effective and necessary. We do not target civilians. We do not glass worlds. But we will break their war machine until it cannot function. The hesitation in the chamber dissolved. This was strategic warfare at its purest, not about battles, but about leverage. Authorization granted, Okafor said. Begin Phase 2. Show them the cost of challenging Earth. Zhao gave a crisp nod. Yes, sir. Her hologram faded, leaving the council in contemplative silence as the stars beyond Luna shimmered with cold, merciless clarity. Months passed. The Valdrath Grand Armada formed slowly, agonizingly, pulling ships from all corners of their empire. As it grew, the Imperium grew weaker. Patrol routes thinned. Subject species sensed cracks in the armor. Tensions rose. Finally, the day arrived. 300,000 Valdrath warships assembled at the frontier of human space. An armada so vast it blotted out sensor arrays and cast shadows across planetary magnetospheres. Krelnath, standing aboard his new flagship, the Unbreakable Will, looked upon the fleet with pride rekindled. This time, he vowed, humanity will break. But when the armada jumped into human territory, expecting terror, frantic defenses, desperate final stands, they found nothing. Empty space, abandoned colonies, silent outposts, no fleets, no resistance. Search the system, Krelnath ordered through clenched teeth. After hours of scanning, the report came. Strategos, human presence, 0. Then another message arrived. Distress call from Kolvar shipyards. They are under attack by human forces. Krelnath froze. Kolvar was 400 light-years behind the Grand Armada. How many human ships? Strategos, 12. His tail lashed violently. 12? Yes, Strategos, 12. He ordered reinforcements, but before they arrived, Kolvar was reduced to molten ruin. Then another distress call, and another, and another. Fuel depots, communications relays, manufacturing hubs. The Valdrath Imperium was not being confronted. It was being dissected. Krelnath realized, too late, that the humans had never intended to face the Grand Armada. They were dismantling the Empire piece by piece, methodically, relentlessly, invisibly. And there was nothing he could do to stop them. The Grand Armada, 300,000 ships, the greatest fleet the Valdrath Imperium had ever assembled, sat in empty human space like a colossal fist swinging at nothing but air. The strategic masterpiece of the Imperium, a display meant to terrify entire civilizations, now drifted aimlessly as reports of disaster poured in from deep within Valdrath territory. To the Valdrath commanders, the situation felt unreal, as if the universe itself was malfunctioning. On the bridge of the Unbreakable Will, High Strategos Krelnath stared at tactical screens filled with red alerts. Every minute, a new one flashed to life. Kolvar's shipyards destroyed. Fuel Depot Delta 7 offline. Relay Network Sigma disrupted across 6 systems. Prime Sector Refinery annihilated. The voice of the communication officer trembled with each transmission. Strategos, Strike Group Omega has lost contact with 3 supply routes, and we are receiving civilian traffic reporting human attacks in systems 400 to 600 light-years behind us. How many human ships? Krelnath whispered. The officer swallowed. Reports vary, 10 to 15 per strike. And they are destroying major military facilities? Vexel asked, horrified. Yes, Strategos. Krelnath's claws dug into the console. 12 ships cannot destroy the Kolvar shipyards. It is not possible. Kolvar is protected by... A voice cut him off. Or was protected, another officer said softly. Silence fell across the bridge. The Kolvar shipyards had produced warships for 2,000 years. They had existed since before the Valdrath invented quantum shielding. Kolvar had survived rebellions, supernova shockwaves, cyber attacks, and rogue AI uprisings, until humanity. When images of the destroyed shipyards arrived, the bridge fell silent. The orbital platform was reduced to twisted metal drifting through space. Entire supercarrier frames hung half-melted like broken bones. Sub-reactors vented plumes of coolant that crystallized into shimmering clouds. Thousands of Valdrath workers and engineers had evacuated, but the infrastructure, the heart of production, was gone forever. Strategos, a junior officer said, we cannot respond. Every time we attempt to redirect part of the armada, another 3 systems report attacks. It is mathematically impossible to defend them all. Fexel's voice was low, heavy with dread. They are not fighting us. They are dismantling us. In the Valdrath core worlds, the collapse began quietly, subtle, almost imperceptible. A shipyard delayed production. A fuel pipeline stalled. A communication hub flickered offline. Then, like a contagion, failures cascaded. Valdrath citizens who had never known scarcity suddenly faced resource rationing. Construction projects halted. Transit lanes shut down. When the communications network fractured, worlds grew isolated. Panic tremors stirred across sectors that had known only domination in order for millennia. But the true nightmare for the Imperium was not human strikes. It was rebellion. The subject species, those conquered, subjugated, and reshaped into tributaries, had always feared Valdrath's retaliation. The Imperium's myth of invincibility had kept them obedient. But once footage of the 14-minute massacre spread across hidden networks, everything changed. The Kororath declared independence and seized their starports. The Vexel revolted in coordinated planetary actions. The Helixix Syndicate refused tribute payments. Entire clusters began ignoring Imperial authority outright. The Imperium depended on fear. Fear had evaporated. One intelligence analyst presented reports to Emperor Thrasio. "Your Majesty," he stammered, we have confirmed uprisings in 32 systems. More are joining. Several species are forming coalitions. They are declaring the Imperium weakened." The Emperor's claws scraped the armrest of his throne. "We must restore order. Dispatch the Grand Armada immediately." The analyst hesitated. "Majesty, the Grand Armada is unable to respond." "Impossible." Kesserin stepped forward. "The Armada is too far from the core. Their FTL drives require synchronized fuel chains. Those chains are broken. They cannot jump in coordinated waves. Even if they attempted, many vessels would arrive without ammunition or support infrastructure." A realization washed over the Emperor, a cold, hollow, chilling recognition. Humanity had not just attacked their facilities. Humanity had severed the arteries of their empire. While the Valdrath struggled to comprehend the scale of the onslaught, humanity executed Phase 2 with terrifying precision. Aboard the stealth carrier Phantom, Admiral Zhao observed real-time feeds from 30 different strike groups operating deep within Valdrath space. The carrier itself remained cloaked, invisible to most sensor arrays, drifting just outside nebular mist that masked its signature. The tactical displays resembled a surgeon's overview of an ongoing operation. Clean cuts, precise incisions, nothing wasted. Strike Group reports success at Morath shipyards. 0 casualties. Strike Group 12 has disabled the Xerxes Prime fuel facility. Estimated downtime, permanent. Strike Group 3 has eliminated tactical relay towers across the Dorian Belt. Valdrath communication blackout expanding. Zhao nodded as each update appeared. "How many counter-response fleets detected?" she asked. "None successfully engaged. They are unable to track our movements. Most of their ships are tied up in rebellion suppression." "Good," she said. "Continue." Her officers watched her with a mixture of admiration and fear. Admiral Rebecca Jiao was not loud, not dramatic, not boastful. But every word she spoke felt like it carried the mass of planets. Humanity did not seek glory. Humanity sought victory, and Zhao was the embodiment of that doctrine. Across the Imperium, human strike groups began to feel like ghosts, appearing anywhere, disappearing instantly, always leaving devastation behind. On the industrial world of Yassaran, workers witnessed 12 Terran ships phase into real space, fire kinetic rounds into orbital manufacturing rings, and vanish before planetary defenses could even target them. On the fuel world of Praxum, Valdrath defenders readied plasma cannons, only to watch human missiles dance around their fire like they already knew where each shot would be. In the communication hub of Lazar Prime, quantum relays exploded in synchronized patterns. Every Valdrath message routed through the sector became static. The Imperium was not just losing control, it was losing coherence. Meanwhile, the Grand Armada waited. Krelnath paced the bridge, fury radiating from every movement. "We must return. We must defend the core." "But Strategos," an officer stammered, "if we abandon this position, we admit weakness. The subject species—" "They are already rebelling," Krelnath snapped. "There is nothing left to pretend." Thexel exhaled slowly. "Strategos, we should have listened earlier. The humans never intended to meet us here. They wanted us to be stuck, immobilized, while they dismantled everything behind us." Krelnath slammed a fist into the console. "Enough! Prepare the fleet for emergency redeployment." But the navigation officer lifted trembling hands. "Strategos, we do not have the fuel reserves. Our logistics fleet was destroyed. The Valdrath Imperium did not anticipate losing them." For a moment, Krelnath couldn't speak. Then came another transmission. "Strategos, new report from Thessaron Prime. A human stealth ship breached the capital defenses." Krelnath's eyes widened. "What?" "It fired a kinetic impactor at the Emperor's Palace moon." A hush fell over the bridge. "What was the result?" Fexel whispered. The answer came in a voice barely audible. "Complete destruction. The capital moon, the grand symbol of Valdrath eternity, was gone." Humanity hadn't obliterated the capital. Humanity hadn't killed the Emperor. Humanity hadn't attacked civilians. They hit the symbol. They hit the throne's shadow. They showed mercy, but also dominance. Krelnath slumped, as if the gravity of his world suddenly doubled. "They can reach anywhere," he murmured. "Anywhere. And they choose not to kill us," Thexel added softly, horrified in a new way. "That is the worst part. They are showing us restraint." The Grand Armada, the greatest fleet ever constructed, sat paralyzed in space, hopeless, helpless, humiliated. Behind them, their empire burned. Ahead of them, humanity waited. And everywhere in between, the galaxy whispered, "The Imperium is dying." The Emperor's Palace. Moon of Thessaron Prime had stood for nearly 8,000 years, an architectural marvel carved into a natural satellite, wrapped in layers of ceremonial fortifications, protected by the most advanced planetary shields the Valdrath Imperium had ever produced. It was not merely a structure, it was a statement, a reminder to every living being in the Empire. The Valdrath endure. The Valdrath rule. The Valdrath cannot fall. And then, in the span of a heartbeat, it died. The kinetic impactor struck with the force of an extinction event. A 10-ton tungsten rod accelerated to a significant fraction of light speed, carried enough kinetic energy to crack continents, and when it hit the palace moon, the resulting explosion tore across the surface like a star being born in reverse. The first fissure split the moon in half. The second carved a canyon hundreds of kilometers long. Then the entire satellite shuddered, fractured, and began to collapse inward. From the surface of Thessaron Prime, billions of Valdrath citizens watched as their sacred moon broke apart. Chunks of glowing stone peeled away in slow-motion arcs, turning into fiery streaks that entered the atmosphere and rained down across the night sky. The palace, once the seat of imperial majesty, was reduced to drifting shards of molten debris. For the first time in living memory, the Valdrath Imperium understood fear. Inside the throne room, overlooking the devastation, Emperor Thracial stood motionless. His golden eyes reflected the burning fragments of the moon as they fell toward the planet's horizon. Behind him, advisors and ministers trembled in silence. "They were inside our defenses," the Emperor whispered. No one dared respond. "They bypassed our shields. They slipped through our sensors." His voice shook, a sound so foreign that the advisors exchanged terrified glances. "They struck our moon, in our own system." Dexler, the Emperor's oldest military advisor, stepped forward with shaking limbs. "Majesty, this is a message." "A message?" Thracial hissed, rage flickering. But even the anger felt hollow. "They could have destroyed us." "Yes," Dexler said softly, "and the fact that they did not, that is the message." He gestured to the burning sky. "They are telling us they can end us at any moment, but they choose not to." Silence pressed down like atmospheric pressure. The Emperor lowered himself onto the throne, his posture collapsing with the weight of defeat. "For 10,000 years, he murmured, we believed there was no power greater than the Imperium, that our control was destiny." He closed his eyes. "We were wrong." Aboard the Terran stealth frigate, Shadow of Terra, Commander Lisa Park watched the explosion from long-range sensors. The feed resembled a star going supernova, then collapsing in on itself. No triumphant cheers filled the bridge. No applause. Only quiet professionalism. "Message ready, Commander," the comms officer said. Park nodded. "Broadcast it to all Valdrath frequencies." A moment later, her voice echoed across hundreds of systems. "This is the Terran Fleet. We could have hit your throne world. This is mercy. End this war." When the transmission ended, the Shadow of Terra engaged its cloak, slipped into the void, and was gone, leaving only the ruins of an ancient symbol behind. In the Imperial Council chamber, the atmosphere was funereal. Ministers, generals, scientists, and intelligence leaders gathered in silence. No hissing arguments, no defiant speeches, no illusions. The empire was collapsing. Supply lines had disintegrated. Shipyards were ruins. Fuel depots were slag. Communications networks flickered like dying stars. Subject species were rising in open rebellion. And the Grand Armada, 300,000 ships, was stranded, powerless, and irrelevant. The Emperor stood. "We cannot win this war." The admission rolled across the chamber like a seismic wave. It shattered the last remnants of imperial pride. "We must sue for peace." No one objected. No one argued. The Imperium had run out of time, out of ships, out of illusions. "Prepare a diplomatic delegation," Thracial ordered. His voice was old now, older than the Empire itself. "And pray that humanity accepts." 6 weeks later, the treaty was signed aboard the TSF Indomitable. The Valdrath delegation arrived in a modest shuttle. No ceremonial fanfare, no armored escort, no towering banners. They stepped into a ship designed not for intimidation, but for efficiency. Steel gray halls, smooth lighting, functional architecture. The simplicity of human design felt unnerving to them. No embellishment, no grandeur, no ego. Everything existed for purpose, not spectacle. Admiral Rebecca Zhao stood at the center of the chamber, hands clasped behind her back, posture steady and calm. The Valdrath representatives approached her with visible hesitation. High Strategos Krelnath, his scales still dull with shame, met her gaze. "I do not understand," he said quietly. "How did a species so young become so lethal? How did you develop such weapons, such tactics?" Zhao studied him for a moment. When she spoke, her voice was soft, but carried the weight of centuries. "We spent 200 years fighting ourselves." The room fell silent. "The Proxima Wars nearly destroyed us. Entire continents burned. Colonies vanished. Our oceans boiled. We unleashed weapons on each other that no sane species should have ever invented." She took a breath. "We built railguns to pierce armored citadels. drone swarms that could erase cities, AI that predicted movements before they happen, gravitic shears that shredded our own fleets. We created horrors designed to kill opponents who were just as intelligent, adaptive, and determined as we were. Her gaze hardened. You spent 10,000 years conquering species that could barely reach orbit. You fought children and convinced yourselves you were gods. Krelnath lowered his eyes. Zhao continued, "We didn't ask for this war, but once you declared it, the outcome was inevitable. You just didn't know it yet." The silence that followed was absolute. Finally, Krelnath spoke, voice a whisper of broken pride. "Then we never stood a chance." Zhao offered him a small, solemn nod. "No, you didn't." The treaty signatures glowed across the holographic display. With a final digital seal, the war officially ended. The Valdrath Imperium ceded all disputed systems, recognized Terran sovereignty, agreed to mutual non-aggression, and, perhaps the most humbling, requested Terran assistance in stabilizing their collapsing infrastructure. Humanity accepted, not out of weakness, not out of pity, but because a stable galaxy was better than a burning one. In the weeks that followed, the galaxy reshaped itself. Subject species reclaimed autonomy. Valdrath fleets retreated. Terran diplomats traveled to worlds that had feared the Imperium for generations. And across 1,000 star systems, one truth echoed: humanity had arrived. And the galaxy would never be the same again. On the bridge of the Indomitable, Admiral Jiao looked out at the stars, calm, unassuming points of light scattered across the void. She thought about the species who had underestimated humans. She thought about the Proxima Wars, the unthinkable cost humanity once paid to learn how to survive itself. War, she knew, had shaped humanity into something sharp, something dangerous, something relentless, but also something capable of mercy. And as the Indomitable drifted through the silent expanse, her final thought was one that would later become a proverb across the stars. We do not fight for glory. We do not fight for honor. We fight to win. And humanity had won, not because they wanted war, but because they knew how to end it.